Good afternoon, members, and welcome to the Safer Communities Overview Scrutiny meeting. I'd like to thank the officers for attending too. Just to confirm, this council supports the use of Welsh language within its meetings, but we've not received any request or notification, so we won't be using any Welsh today. The meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind you that this meeting is webcast, so please turn off or silence your mobile phones and make sure you speak into the microphones. In case of the fire drills, please follow the signs to the exit to exit the building. Members, can I also remind you to sign the attendance book that's circulating and confirm if you have any declarations of interest. And have there been any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Neil Waite.
Thank you. In relation to declarations of interest, are there any to declare, members? No, thank you. Agenda item number 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of September. Just to remind members, these minutes relate to the meeting we had to scrutinise the regional homelessness strategy. I'm assuming members have read the minutes through, and can you confirm the accuracy, please? Thank you. The action sheet, Chris. Are there any points there?
Yes, Chair, the recommendations from the previous meeting have been sent to the executive member, but I believe we're still waiting for a response. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the update of actions, members?
So I've not been to this before. Who is the executive member that's going to?
Yes, I believe it's Councillor David Daniels, yeah. So on to agenda item number 5, highway maintenance. The purpose of this report is for the committee to consider whether the prioritisation of capital funding for highways maintenance adequately manages the risks associated with keeping the highway safe. I'd like to welcome Steve Jarrett, who is the Assistant Chief Officer, Technical Services, Neighbourhoods Planning and Public Protection. That's the title. And Mark Strickland, the Highway Asset Management Officer. Andrew Villas, the Group Lead of Highways Network, was attending at one point, but unfortunately he isn't available to attend today. We wish him a speedy recovery. So I'll now hand over to the officers for a brief outline of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The item is described by yourself, Chair. We're in the process now of reviewing our Highways Asset Management Plan. That the existing Highways Asset Management Plan is coming to an end at the end of this year. We need to replace that, so it's a timely time for us to come to committee and have a look. We've discussed, or we've pulled together information on the Highways Asset Plan, included that as an appendix for how we carry out our maintenance, and that includes both reactive and proactive maintenance, from potholes to resurfacing, if I give some ideas of what reactive and proactive is. And yeah, Chair, we'd just be grateful for committee's thoughts on the work we've done to date, and any recommendations that the committee could come up with, or would like us to look at as officers to improve and ensure the plan is appropriate and sufficient going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Steve. So members, I know that we've gone through this agenda quite rigorously yesterday, and we have some questions, so it's over to you. Councillor Powell?
Okay, looking at 1.4 of the report, all 22 local authorities in Wales have been involved in creating their own highway asset management plans. So I would like to ask, are we doing that independently, or are they working together? Are we looking at best practice from other plans? And, are we trying to get a central theme and follow national guidance rather than just doing 22 separate things?
Right. Yes. Is the short answer to that. We have been working since 2000 with the County Surveyors Society Wales. They have a project for the Highways Asset Management Plan, which brought it from basically nothing up to where we are at the moment. It's a common theme. We all use templates provided by them through a contractor, and this, or the new and the old templates, have been used by Torfaen in conjunction with the other 22 local authorities.
Councillor Slade, yeah?
In 2016, the national guidance was rewritten, changing the focus from a risk-based approach, or changing the focus to a risk-based approach from the original prescriptive advice. Can you provide more detail on the differences between the two approaches?
Yes, the risk-based approach was based on the safety risk of carrying out maintenance to the highway. Safety is the major driver for the Highways Asset Management Plan. The authority have, under the legislation given to it under the Highways Act, have only in the Highways Act there is only a brief mention as to what the local authority as a highway authority have to keep the highways safe. That has been expanded, as it says in the report, by judicial precedent to making sure that a local authority carry out timely repairs to the highway assets, and that's not only the carriageway, but it could be footways, it could be bridges, it could be retaining walls. These are all included in the Highway Asset Management Plan. We tend to concentrate on the carriageways as being the focus, because they tend to take up most of the capital funding. The differences between the old prescriptive 2006 Code of Practice was that, as it was a new Code of Practice, it was given a long time in gestation, and the roads boards that put it together decided that there had to be guidance on how deep a pothole had to be, how often you safety inspected a road. So there were prescriptive times and dates and figures within that. The 2016 rewrite turned that completely on its head and said, right, we're not going to give you set figures. What we will do is we'll allow you to assess those risks yourself. It was understood that by being prescriptive, you could, for argument's sake, push a local authority like Cardiff to do something that that they could leave a pothole in the centre of Cardiff, maybe 50 millimetres deep, which a lot of people would go over and trip and cause a high safety risk. Whereas if you had a back lane in Powys that only one person per day went across, you could, and Powys would be required to do the same level of work and repair as Cardiff was, and there were differences. Each individual authority had different requirements. So the 2016 rewrite went down the route of allowing local authorities to more, hopefully, to get to a point where they could determine their the way that they manage their highway asset management, their highways, in a more bespoke way, relevant to the place where they were, relevant to the number of vehicles and types of traffic that were going over the roads. So that's the reason why there was the, as I understand it, why there was the change.
So what you're saying is the previous code before 2016 didn't look at a risk-based approach at all. It wasn't risk-based.
No, it was risk-based, but had prescriptive levels of intervention. The new code takes those levels of intervention away. It makes them investigatory rather than intervention.
Okay, thanks. Are you confident that our new code then meets the requirements of the new guidance?
It's been written in a way that follows the CSS guidelines, which also mirror the 2016 Code of Practice. I'm happy to allow that to be pushed to, or I would allow it, not pushed, would be to present that to Council or Cabinet for their authorisation, is that the right word? Approval, yes.
One of the reasons I ask, because if you go to page 43, for an example, so we've got a carriageway category, carriageway hierarchy of categories. Now, all the categories are the same, well, apart from the first one, because they're all routes between locations, but the only difference is the volume of traffic using them. Is that correct? Main Distributor Road is a route between locations carrying 10 to 12,000 movements per day. Local Access Road is a route between locations up to 1,000 movements per day. Yeah?
Yes.
That's not what the Code of Practice says, though, is it? The Code of Practice doesn't give any traffic figures whatsoever.
No. CSS Wales guidance was used in looking at these. The only way that we could, or the only way that CSS Wales and us could determine that the a safety risk, an easily defined safety risk, was to actually look at the way or the number of vehicles that pass over a road could be would increase that safety risk. If you've got one car going over a road per day, the safety risk of that car having an accident is very low. If you've got 2,000 vehicles going over that road, it's proportionally larger. In Torvine, our highest traffic roads are something around 25,000 vehicles per day. So they're very, very high things. But there are ones that will only take 4 or 5 vehicles per day on the same network. And the risk-based approach means that we look at the ones with the highest risk exposure more not favourably, but we look at those in higher priority to the lower ones, to the ones where vehicles are only tracking across them.
Yeah, I understand that. Two things. CSS Wales signed off on the code. The other thing that confuses me is we've gone away from the descriptions to traffic, but we don't actually count the traffic. We don't count the traffic as a matter of course, do we? Because somewhere in the report it says that we can't afford to do traffic counts. So I don't know why we've gone away from descriptions in the absence. Well, we haven't got. Well, all we've got is we haven't got the data, have we? We haven't got the data to sort of to back that up. All we've got is estimates. So I don't know why. For an example, you've got local access road, route between locations up to 1,000 movements a day. I don't know what that means. Local access road in theirs, in the code. In rural areas, these roads serve small settlements and provide access to individual properties and land. They are often only single lane width and unsuitable for HGVs. In urban areas, they are often residential loops or cul-de-sacs. Now, I understand that, and I understand what that looks like. So, to me, I would be able to give you a number of streets that fit that description, whereas I'm not really in a position to say, well, that would be less than 1,000 movements a day, because I don't know what that looks like. So I'm not really satisfied that in the absence of data, well, we haven't stuck to the descriptions.
We haven't followed the code of practice descriptions because it's not a Welsh. It's an English document. CSS Wales, signed off on it. However, the project that CSS Wales have undertaken for the Highways Asset Management Plan, they've employed a consultant. The consultant has taken on board all the information that it can, and has come up with a set of guidelines that we are using as a Welsh local authority under the CSS Wales. As to the movements per day, the movements per day is of a vehicle travelling over a road.
Yeah.
Right, so you said you didn't understand that, so it's when...
Not over 1,000 vehicles a day, as opposed to 1,500. I wouldn't know what that difference is.
Okay.
Yet one would be a link road, the other would be a local access road. That's what I'm saying.
Well, yes, you are right in saying that in 2012 we stopped doing routine traffic flow information. The information that has been put into the Highway Asset Management is based on estimates. Because we can't do anything else other than base it on estimates.
That's fine. I haven't got a problem with doing estimates. But you still haven't answered the question, why do we go away from descriptions? Because descriptions sum it up perfectly, in my opinion. I just don't know why we haven't stuck with the descriptions, because the descriptions describe perfectly what a main distributor is, or what's the difference between a main distributor and a local access road. Whereas, from these descriptions in the asset management plan, all we know is there are routes between locations. I mean, in terms of a local access road, it's a route between locations unless it's a cul-de-sac, because presumably a cul-de-sac is a local access road, but it isn't a route between locations, is it? What I'm saying is, I still don't understand why we didn't just stick to the descriptions, because to me, they're more accurate, and there's something really you can hang your hat on, whereas I don't believe we can hang our hat on these vague descriptions based on traffic figures, which we are estimating at the end of the day.
I think Mark has explained the interpretation that's taken place of the document, the Highways document, to get to an asset management plan that local authorities are going to be signing up to. And part of that interpretation was about interpreting the descriptions, as you've noted there, which I agree give some clarity around what routes are what, into the information that's translated into the plans. That's certainly a valid question. If the committee were minded to ask us that as a recommendation, or certainly a question, we could come back on for the committee and give more advice around that, and perhaps point to some examples by other authorities or other guidance given by the particular professional bodies that we're involved with.
I can only support Councillor Slade in that using terminology that's based on estimates against a document that we've used for guidance doesn't make sense to me. So I fully support that. Councillor Evans, I think, is next.
In section 2.3, why is there such a jump in allocation in 2013-2014? Yeah, it's page 24, it is. Yeah, 2013 and 2014 is a big jump from...
So 12-13 to 13-14? Was that when LTBI came in?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's going to be as a response to, as a allocation of local government borrowing initiative funding. We had additional funding from Welsh Government around that time, just before my time in Highways, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a form of Welsh Government prudential borrowing.
Oh, that's that one again. Yeah.
And Councillor Thomas, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. 2.4. Can you provide us with an example of a safety risk apart from the obvious, it being a pothole?
Yeah, it could be any number of things. Could be a pothole, that's the obvious one. Could be a displaced curb. Could be parapet fencing on a structure that's loose. Could be safety fencing that's not contiguous with the next part of the safety fence. So, yeah, any defect with a highway asset, really.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair. If I just staying with the same 2.4. How do you distinguish between a safety inspection and a condition inspection?
Right. At the moment, safety inspections are carried out on a set frequency, based on the historical hierarchy of the roads, and a risk assessment that was done some years ago now, based on several factors such as proximity of vulnerable users, so schools, doctor surgeries. A condition assessment is tends to be an annual survey of the roads to find out what condition they are in. The link between safety and condition is slightly tenuous, but it is given that if you spend money on the highway, then you are likely to get less safety risks. So if you spend money on the highway, you're likely to get less potholes, less defects out there. So the capital allocation, which is what I think we're looking at, is the way that we spend that money over to husband the local roads, the local road network over a period of years. A safety one is the one to stop the immediate danger. So if we see something that somebody could fall over based on a set of criteria that the highways safety inspectors are employed to do, we will deal with that. But the condition one is to look at something over a period of time so that we don't get into a position where in 2 or 3 years' time we're getting so many safety defects that we can't actually afford to fill those in.
Councillor Ashley, I think you indicated to come in, yeah?
Just wanted a supplementary in there because the obvious question then is how many of those you get, because it's not indicated in here. I mean, obviously we're all ward councillors and we get phone calls from people, potholes, rocky curbs, everything in which is, and it's something, and does that cost a lot as a reactive, inspection, because we'll do it?
The actual figures are logged in on our database, our Mayrise database. However, to abstract the information for safety, everything that comes into the Mayrise database is logged as an inspection. So it might not be it could be for somebody cutting down a hedge, overhanging hedge or whatever. So they're all lumped together. I can give you those figures. The reason why I haven't put them into this report is because they're not filtered at the moment. So I can't give you the number of actual pothole safety defects that come out because they're all lumped together.
It's pertinent, isn't it, to this discussion?
Councillor Evans, yeah?
My question is, you said about the condition, if you're doing a yearly inspection, a lot can happen to a road in one particular year from one inspection to the other. Traffic conditions, weather, it can dramatically change the road service, So shouldn't we be looking to monitor these roads that are getting in a bad state of repair?
As a highway engineer, I would agree with you. However, as a local authority employee, we have to work within guidelines and policies. And the policy as described at the moment is that we look at those, the condition survey of those roads annually, doing the safety inspections, which can be as regular as once a month in the high frequency, high travelled areas. If there is a degradation of the condition of the road, then the highways inspector will log that, and then, as it says in the report, that is then put into as part as the evidence base to actually work out a scheme of roads or a hierarchy of roads that will be allocated funds from the capital allocation.
Thank you. Councillor Ashes.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just to sort of assure you that the condition inspection, whilst annual, isn't the only time that road is looked at. It will be looked at more often than that as part of the safety inspections rather than a condition inspection.
Councillor, I think you indicated,
Yes, yeah. Sorry, 2.7, Welsh Government grant funding. Is there a potential for grant funding to cease? I've got another one underneath it. What would be the implications and what mitigations are in place should this happen?
The grant funding is provided by Welsh Government to carry out mechanical. A vehicle is sent around our A's, B's and C's, and that picks up the general conditions based on a set of criteria set down by the UK pavement management system. That is then put into a computer program. That computer program then generates a list of sections of roads that are graded. Those grades of roads are then allocated a colour, and we get plans out which show green if it's good, amber if it's a little bit dicey, red if it's poor. If that was to stop, then obviously that information would cease, and we would have to rely totally then on detailed visual surveys by OE inspectors. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Pray indulgence, Chair. Do you actually have a map of all this, or does it come as data? I did say I'd ask that question, didn't I? Yes.
The information can be pulled out as graphical information, but it tends to be we have to pay extra for hard copy. It comes in a computer program, so we can have a look at it on a screen, and we can find out where all the bits and pieces are, and we do. And that comes as it also comes as a CSV file, which I think is just a load of data and locations, and it's eastings and northings and starts and ends.
Committee did one of what I did, but when the list was available, because obviously that must give you quite a graphical indication of trends and various bits and pieces.
It gives us graphical information on very, very limited amounts of the roads. Torvine is unusual in that the A, B's and C class roads only make up a very small percentage of the total. The majority are unclassified roads, and when I mean unclassified roads, that could be anything from a lane going over the top of a mountain to a cul-de-sac to, in certain cases, quite heavily trafficked roads. Unfortunately, the grant, I'm not sure whether the grant is going to stop. Looking at today's headlines, I doubt whether it will. I I think Welsh Government are now starting to realise that road maintenance is a bit of a political hot potato. And I would hope that from this we might be able to get, with the right pressure through WLGA and through local councillors, to get a little bit more funding for the one of the areas that I have a bit of a passion for.
Councillor Evans, yeah?
And on item 211, do we only report back to those who request it? Should we be doing it as a matter of course to all those who report?
This is a communications point of view, and from the point of view of as I understand it, all the information that comes in through to the Mayroy system, is gathered. If that information is, and a lot of that information is anonymous, so somebody will ring in and say, "Oh, there's a pothole. Do you want to leave your name?" No. And all we get is we send somebody out there is a pothole. We fix it. We've got nobody to tell that we fixed. So yeah, I would agree with you that the communication, the way that we communicate as engineers is the way engineers communicate. As you can possibly understand, I think I've sent certain people to sleep here from my trying to communicate what we do. But doing it in a way that is modern, then, is probably one of the ways that we would look to find. We would ask, give us pointers on this.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just coming out. I think that's probably a council-wide issue as well, in terms of how people can contact council and how they request then any information to be fed back. I think the customer systems we have at the moment allow opportunity to either say you do want a response or you don't want a response, depending on which channel you're coming through. So it's customer choice sometimes as well.
Councillor Thomas.
Just a suggestion, just quickly went into my mind. If somebody rings in and says there's a pothole and they don't want to leave their name, wouldn't it a good idea be for you guys to take a photo of it before, take a photo of it after, and give it to our SRS guys and get it on social media, on Facebook, and say this was reported anonymously, but it's now been repaired?
That's a recommendation. At the moment, we are now getting to the point where our data management system is now electronic based. So the inspectors go out with a tablet with the maps that they have to look at. They then, if they see a safety defect or a condition variation, as they call it in the new, or as we call it in the new document, they will take a photograph of it, so that logs it where it is. It will be geo-referenced, so that the team then that are going to come along and deal with that problem, it'll go straight through the cloud into their tablet, and they then go off and do their work. So hopefully the speed which we deal with safety defects will be speeded up. It'll become more rapid. We will have a photograph that the inspector took, and we hope to have a photograph that the team took that repaired the pothole.
Yeah.
And that should be within the time limits that we've specified.
I'm very fond of potholes, especially when they're repaired. So Jess is laughing, but the point about it is we tend to get clusters of potholes, and we tend to get clusters of reports, certainly on social. And you're laughing because then because someone lives in my ward as well, and this is not a ward matter, but you get reports in clusters. Certain areas and wards get spates of potholes, spates and moans. And if you've got a pothole of the week, which I can put out on social media, I mean, making it fun, but it's relevant for people. It sticks in people's minds, and that's the point. We're doing something about it and being the good guys, and you're being a good guy. You make that point. The press like it, social media's like it, Twitter likes it, and that's the point I'm making. It's the good guys thing. Yeah. He likes it too, and he's always part of the week,
It is an amusing thing, but that's exactly what Welsh Government did.
Yeah.
They actually asked for, during a week's time, send in your pothole, and we will put it up on the...
It's competition.
I'm happy to do it.
Fair enough.
I'm afraid highlighting road failure wouldn't be a good communication exercise for me, but Councillor Slade.
Yeah, thanks. On that note, just to say, if you're going to take a photograph of it, you better be filling it in rather quick, because what you're doing is highlighting to the public that you know about it, and it's as eggs is eggs, somebody will fall in it, because you've identified it. Anyway, my question about section 212. Can you provide us with an example of how annual reports and data from various sources are correlated to provide an analysis of road condition? For example, how is this captured? What system is used to correlate the information and prioritise roads?
The system as it sets out in the policy is that an experienced engineer will look at the survey data that's available to him. That could be, if it's on an A, B or C road, that could be the scanner. They will look if it's on a road that is deemed to or over high-speed road, A's, B's or C's. They will look at the skidding resistance, and they will look at the data for that and find out if there's a correlation between skidding resistance and the poor condition on the scanner report. They will also take into account any information on accident data after investigating those accident data, because unfortunately the accident data as supplied by the police can be somewhat vague and not always to the right spot, to the right having the right information in there that would relate to road condition. Again, the accident data would be then sifted through, and where road condition was seen as a factor, that would have been cross-referenced with the other two surveys. They will also look at the estimated, if that is the case, or the actual traffic flows for the road, to find out what the safety risk of the number of vehicles crossing that area is. And based on that information, they will then put that together as a list.
Yeah, thanks. So these bits of information, we've got scanner, skidding resistance, accident data, traffic flows. What you're saying is they're all held in different places. Is that true?
The scanner and yes, they're carried out by different methods. They are correlated. Scanner and scrim are correlated by a contractor that we use, Yotta, who will then pass that information over to us as two separate reports. It's for the experienced engineer then to collate all that information, based then on final visual surveys. They will go around and make sure that they're checked. We will then provide or run up a list of schemes to be looked at from condition.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to get down to is, do you have a list? You have a list of streets, and I understand there's like 1,400 streets. How do you then start hanging this data against the street? That's what I'm kind of getting at. I mean, is it a piece of paper? Do you sort of have a piece of paper or a card for each street, and then sort of say, yes, there's an issue with scanner data, or an issue with scrim data? And then and then how, when you've got all these bits, all this information collated against the street, presumably, how do you then know which one of your 1,400 is more important than the other one? If you know what I mean? How do you prioritise them? I mean, I think that if it was all in the same database, it would all, you could do a sort, couldn't you, on various things. You could factor in, and then you would come up with a hit list, because you could interrogate all that data simultaneously. But a human being can't do that, can he? So I just wondered how, would you start off with a list based on safety inspections, perhaps, and hang the data on there? That's what I'm interested in, to be honest.
No, we don't list them on safety inspections because it's a condition survey. So the scanner information comes in, that's the start. The scrim comes in. That, like I said, I have to reiterate this. We get that information in, and then it is collated together. And if there are cross matches and a final detailed visual inspection proves that that road is in poor condition, that will then make the list.
Yeah, but how is it correlated? That's the bit I'm getting at. I mean, presumably you have a list of accident sites, you have a list of scrim data. I mean, perhaps you could tell us what format that arose in. Then you have a list, presumably, of the scanner data, or the red sites, I think you call them, and then various other lists. So, I mean, how do you physically correlate and analyse all these disparate bits of information if they're all in different systems? That's what I'm getting at.
Well, that's the job for the engineer. That's what he does. They're not lists. The scanner data comes over as graphical information. The scrim information comes over as graphical information. I believe the accident data comes over as a report.
Yes.
So these have to be looked at individually and then cross-reference. If we get a match, if we get 2 places, 3 places, all with those information on, as it says in the draft document, the draft hand, where we have safety risks, high safety risks, we will consider those first. Where we have condition risk, we'll consider those second. And where we have long-term, I forget my actual reading of that, but there are 3 separate sections. So safety, condition, and then long-term risk then.
Not really, Chair. I'm still none the wiser how it's achieved.
Can I ask the question?
Councillor Jones? I would just like to ask, as you said that the report from the police can be vague, does this impede your work, and does that mean that there's bigger safety issues out there that perhaps you always can't get around or look at in the right way?
The information from the police can be vague. It just takes officer time to actually pinpoint the relevant details that we are required. I mean, a lot of accidents are not road condition related. They're not vehicle condition related. They're down to driver misuse and speed. And a lot of those problems we have to filter out. So there will be, luckily, I don't think I can remember any traffic accidents that have been condition related, certainly in the last couple of years. And the state of our high-speed roads, which is one of the performance indicators, would corroborate that because of all Wales. I think we're this year or last year we were 5th, and we've not been up the top quartile. Again, that's because we only have a small amount of A's, B's and C's, which means that the money that we can spend on those can make a great difference. If we had a bigger or closer to the Wales average, the money that we could actually spend on these roads would be proportionately less. So the roads in poor maintenance would be higher. So to answer your question, I'll go back to your question. Yes, information can be difficult to to tease out. It's very rarely condition related, but we have to investigate each one, which takes up officer time.
We do seek to validate it before it goes onto our GIS system. The accident data that is supplied by the police. But there are issues with that validation sometimes as well, which then requires further officer time as well, as Mark mentioned. That helps.
Councillor Ashley, you wanted to come in?
You just said you've got a JS system. What Alan was getting at, and what I'm kind of thinking, you've got the universal Welsh system by the sound of it for different categories of roads. Presumably you've got something in there, like we've got all over the council, database stroke spreadsheet, which you feed data into. It must do an alert on it. Presumably, somewhere spreadsheet database has got this roads, the 1,400 roads that Alan mentioned, and we've got here in the report. So, assuming one of those, that you've got a hierarchy in there. I can see a reasonably simple computer program in here that does this. I'm hoping you've got something like that.
Oh, I wish it was a reasonable...
No, you have said to me in the past that you haven't got these, because when I've talked to you about other things like drop curbs, it does seem to me that you haven't got that capability at the moment then.
No, it's important to note that we haven't got the same data for every section of road that we've got in the county borough. In terms of the scrimmer scanner data we were talking about earlier, we've got that for the A, Bs and Cs, we haven't got it for the rest.
Right.
We will have, say, our GIS data for accident stats. That will be county borough-wide across the county.
Can I just come back? So, is that something you could do with? Desirable? No, I'm a serious question. Is that a resource implication that you might have flagged up?
The computer program would be handy.
Yeah.
It's the resource to actually work out what we want to do with that. So it's the computer operators putting that information in and dragging that information out. Is going to be the.
I think, sorry, if you did want to put scanner and scrim data on every section of route, that would be an expensive undertaking, and it's not something that's done by councils, particularly for every section of route. Technically, may not be possible on some.
Yeah, no.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas?
Thanks very much, Chair. You're the best. 2.13. How do we ensure contractors fulfil their duty in erecting signage and completing a letter drop?
That's carried out by another area of the division, our Highways Traffic and Engineering Group, who have a consultancy function as well. So they, after the schemes have been identified, they design the schemes. Design is a broad word in terms of building up, producing the contract documents, going to the framework contractor. That is supervised by engineers in the office, and for the last couple of years we've had supervision on site as well. So a clerk of works type role on site. So all those, we ensure that those things are done as part of the contract requirements through officers of the council. And these are contractors we work with year in, year out, so hopefully you'd think they would perform the functions that they know they need to do as well.
Councillor Two.
Being a local councillor, and getting the complaints about the roads, is there any way that you could ask the councillors in the wards which roads need doing? We've got roads up with us which are really rough. Lots of complaints from the residents. They're not getting their roads done, and we're the ones who take the flak for it. And also, do you seek residents' views on it as well?
First question first, if you like. We don't sort of formally seek members' views or the public views on would you like a road resurfaced, if that was the broadest question. The answer would probably be yes, I would guess, for most members and residents. We're certainly open to any communication from members of the public and members yourselves in terms of, if there's a particular section of highway that's a particular concern in terms of surface, or indeed any other highways asset, but pertinent to that question about resurfacing, certainly look to take those. We also, for the last few years, have, prior to the Chief Officer report being signed off, confirming the programme for that particular year, we forwarded that report to members prior to it being signed off, asking for comments. So, that's another way that we certainly communicate with members before we commit to those works, if you like, or commit to the programme. In terms of the second question, the residents were asked questions about highway matters in the 2017 resident survey, and I believe off the top of my head there was one about trunk roads, not one about trunk roads, one about dual carriageways, which are typically trunk roads for us. We have a small section that we look after, main roads and local roads, residential roads, and they were included in the resident survey, so we've had that information back as well.
And the other one we had was, the list you make out that you're going to do, well, you made it one up in my ward, and you said Viaduct Road on it. Well, everybody up there thought Viaduct Road was going to be done, only 200 yards of it was done, and the flack that the councillors get over that as well, so...
Excellent point. I think we do put in the report that a line about using Violet Road as an example. Not all of Violet Road might be resurfaced, but I appreciate that's probably a line within a report that may then not be picked up as part of a long list. So yeah, that's a good point to ensure that people appreciate that it might not be the full extent of a section road.
I think that question sort of wider public perception. I mean, you said earlier that we might be in the top quarter, and yet public perception is pretty poor in Torfaen. How do you think that we should communicate better that we are maybe up in the top quarter, and that what sort of ideas have you got to change the public perception?
I mean, the resident survey was quite interesting, really, because it reflected what we've been doing over the last number of years. The satisfaction with the dual carriageways and main roads was pretty high. The satisfaction with local roads and residential roads was a lot lower. We can point to our investment decisions where we've resurfaced higher speed roads for the reasons we've been talking about. And people appreciate that those have been done, but not the others. I guess it is a more concerted comms regime. And for example, if we were to publish the list of schemes we we're going to do, explanation around why we're doing those schemes on there and what we would like to be doing. We report to members, member seminars, and in the Chief Officer report it explains things about how much we've identified as priorities, but how little of that we're able to do. And perhaps there's a story to be told more effectively to the public.
Councillor Thomas, I think you wanted to come back in.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the back of Councillor Chew's question, really, don't you think it would be a much better idea for you guys to put together a list of roads in ward members' wards? Come to the ward members, have a meeting with each ward member, sit them down, go through the list and say which roads would you prioritise as you're the ones that know that ward better than what, say, we do, and then prioritise the roads that way. Because I mean, that at least that way, then we are definitely identifying to you the roads that we think, like, for example, some in my ward have been done, which I didn't really think needed doing, that weren't desperately to be done. But there are others that I could have said to you, well, instead of doing that, really you should have done that. Don't you think? This could be a recommendation, but don't you think that would be a more logical idea, really, to come and see ward members rather than just doing what you feel might be right?
Again, and yeah, I mean, if it's a recommendation, we'll certainly look to that. I would highlight the concern about resource with it, in terms of the officers that we've got carrying out this work and meeting every ward member, for example, whether it could be bunched on a basis.
Yeah, what I mean is, if you've already got a list that you're going to do anyway, wouldn't it have been a better idea to come to the ward members and say, this is what we're thinking of doing, rather than us just doing that? Have you got a better suggestion? Have you got roads that you think would be better?
Yeah, we're certainly open to that. You know, we do, like I said, we send the list round, but it is late on in the process, certainly. So if that was a recommendation that at the beginning of when we initially start planning our works and start prioritising streets, that we write to all ward members and ask them if there are particular concerns, bearing in mind it could be 6 months down the road before that list is finalised. I don't see that as too much of an issue, provided we know we can get an effective and efficient way of doing it in terms of time, both for yourself as members and ourselves as officers.
And Councillor Powell, you've indicated?
Yeah, just coming in again on the back of that. So the difference between the ABC roads and the unclassified roads, and presumably, obviously we're in the top quartile for the one, but certainly not the other. You know, how would you envisage we would communicate that to the public? Because obviously more money is going to be spent on one category when they will want it to be spent on the other, you know. How are you going to manage that conflict?
It's unfortunately it's an insurance risk problem. Yes, we would like, given the money as highways engineers, we would make all roads equal. Unfortunately, insurance drives the devil on this one, and the highest risk, being the A's, B's or C's, are the ones where the insurance it is accepted that the insurance risk is the highest, and to defend ourselves at court we have to prove that we are spending that money where the highest safety risk is, which gives we have to justify that through means of how do we quantify that safety risk. And it goes back then to what I originally said, was how many people pass a virtual hole in the road at any one time. So high flows, you have a lot of people passing a virtual hole in the road, a pothole. Might not be there, but they're passing it, and so that safety risk could be higher.
Slade?
Yeah, on that point, you said it's driven by insurance and traffic flows, but we've already sort of determined we don't count the traffic, and I think you said earlier that some unclassified roads carry more traffic than some of the classified roads. So it kind of, I don't think we're getting a consistent line here.
No.
No, what I'm saying is that the A's, B's and C's roads are throwbacks to Gwent. They were given to us by Gwent, and we've not changed them since 1996. There are roads on there, a C road for argument's sake, Crown Road. If everybody knows Crown Road down the bottom of Lantern, that's classed as a C road. Hollybush Way, which is not classed as a C road, takes more traffic than that. It's a simple. So that's what I was alluding to. The new hierarchy does take into account, based on these agreed they are estimates, but they are engineers' estimates from people who walk and look at the roads on a regular basis, to say, right, how many vehicles do you think are travelling down this road? We've got a little thumbnail sketch that I've done. How many vehicles per hour would travel this? How many vehicles would go past you if you were stood in that road on an hour? And then we look at that from the point of view of there's going to be more in the school runs and more at the end of the day. There's going to be less over the nighttime periods. But we've taken all this into account, and this little thumbnail information has been used to inform our estimates. So they're not just estimates plucked out of the air. They are estimates based on a formula. So based on those estimates, we have now produced a new hierarchy, which are different to the A's, B's and C's which we were given by Gwent.
Thanks for that. Jude?
Yeah, very briefly. I'm glad to hear you say that, because what you're talking about is pressure, isn't it? And there are roads that don't fit. That comes out in that report. The roads that have got pressure on that are not marked in there, and it's not just insurance, is it? It's volume. Town centre in Cwmbran is a good example where there are roads there taking pressure that are not on that hierarchy.
Slade, yeah.
Just a minor point. The roads that you say were handed over to Gwent, they are part of the national road categorised the road numbering system. It wasn't Gwent that numbered them. Well, they did number them. But what we've got is A roads, which are principal roads. We've got B roads, which are classified numbered roads, numbered by the Department of Transport. And we've got classified unnumbered roads. And the only ones Gwent numbered were the classified unnumbered roads. So I just thought I'd make that clear, that's all.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas, you're on there.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure really whether this has been kind of answered or not really, but yeah, I'll ask it anyway, and if it's already been answered, you can just tell me to be quiet. It's on bit now. You'd love to, wouldn't you?
The whole point of this is to get information and recommendations, and
yeah.
we can make what we're trying to do as robust as possible.
So on page 26 then, okay, 3.2. How often are A, B and C roads reviewed? And how is it determined which road are placed in each category?
Yeah. That is A's, B's and C's roads in, or the A and B road network is set by government. In England, C roads can be modified by the Highway Authority through a very, very simple process through Geospace. If you wish to reclassify a road, to change your hierarchy in England, all you have to do is to fill in a form, send that off to Geospace, and that C road then can become or can be declassified, or you can put an unnumbered road into the C road category. In Wales, that hasn't happened. In Wales, we have to go through a long, arduous process of consultation to change a C road or an unnumbered road into a C road. And the changeover that we've found on the hierarchy that we've just worked up would mean that we were changing probably 20 or 30 roads, which would take us a hell of a lot of time and a lot of officer time to change. So at the moment, we're in the process of looking at that and saying, from our point of view, we'll leave the hierarchy as it is, A's, B's and C's, and we'll report on those. However, our hierarchy that we will use in our Highway Asset Management Plan to look at looking after our roads over the long period is different to that one. We're running two together, unfortunately, but that's the only way I can see that we can do it.
Councillor Slade, I think you're indicating.
Yeah. Paragraph 3.3, talking about the performance indicators. It says that officers in Wales recognise that A, B and C are, in a pretty good condition. And when you reported the programme this year, you said that we would be able to concentrate perhaps on other roads. Yet 75% of this year's budget was actually spent on the A's, B's and C's. 75% on what we've already determined is 30% of the highway network. I just wondered why we're saying that we can focus on unclassified roads, yet we're still spending the majority of the money, this year anyway, on classified roads.
I believe, Councillor Slade, we've corresponded on this previously. I haven't got that data in front of me, so I'm at a bit of a difficulty in having a technical discussion like that against the 70-30. Perhaps if there's further questions to ask, we could take them outside of committee, if that's okay, Councillor Slade and Chair.
I raised it because I thought it would be of interest to the committee, to be honest. Okay.
I found it quite interesting, actually, that we're spending 75% of the budget on 30% of the road network, and that's quite concerning, actually. But if you want to supply details, I think all of committee would like to see that and maybe come back to you, because I think there's a suggestion that we set up some sort of task and finish group or a...
That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, so maybe we can incorporate that as part of, because that is quite an interesting statistic for me. Anyway, moving on. Carry on, yeah.
Sorry, I did have one last thing. You said the target set for the performance indicator is 2%. When you look at Appendix 1, which is page 30, I mean, we're already in the sort of top quartile. 2% would put us top of the pops across Wales in every category. Would we say that that's achievable or even, desirable?
Desirable, yes. Achievable, probably not.
Well, I say desirable because do you know what the target is for the Welsh Assembly roads, the trunk roads? Do you know what the percentage is?
No.
8%. And I just wonder, it begs the question, I mean, if the Welsh Assembly can live with 8% of its network in a poor condition, I don't understand why we can't live with, whatever it is, 4.6 or... And I honestly think that, we need to be sort of investing more money in our unclassified roads, which would address the concerns of the public that their roads aren't getting any maintenance treatment, that's all. Thank you.
Is that a recommendation, or is it
come out of committee supervision?
We're on to Councillor Ashley next. Councillor Ashley? Question, yeah.
Since 2011, the capital allocation of 3.6 million for highway schemes has been consistently being bolstered by prudential borrowing in the sum of nearly 7.5 million. How can this be sustainable going forward? Got that one okay? He's smiling.
I think with difficulty is the question, is the answer. The local government borrowing initiative was Welsh Government funding from prudential borrowing earlier on in the decade. Since that ended, the council undertook its own prudential borrowing, but obviously that's getting more difficult. Mark mentioned one of the reports today, as officers, we are hoping that, there could be another form of LGBI type funding, because it is difficult to sustain. Last year we had a Welsh Government grant, which we're spending this year. I know WLGA and Councillor Andrew Morgan, as Highways representative, is a firm believer in the likes of LGBI. So hopefully, Welsh Government may come forward with some funding of that nature. Otherwise, then it's difficult budgetary decisions for members effectively to take that during the budget setting processes.
Councillor Slade, I think you're the... Yeah.
Out of the 593 claims since 2011, I think, 490 were successfully defended. What were the issues with the other 103 that meant that we couldn't successfully defend them? And how much did this cost the authority?
I haven't got that data here. I'm afraid Councillor Slade, again, Chair, if and Councillor Slade is acceptable, we can report back on that data. There'll be individual cases with individual reasons, and values will be variable.
If you could get back to the committee with that. Councillor Powell?
If I could just come in on that, because that was originally something I asked. Just so you know, it's not Alan's fault. But
You wanted to ask it.
my question around that, which I was coming to later, was around the assurance claims. I think the committee has a concern that we're not perhaps correctly having a balance of risk around different categories of road. And we really need to know, I think, how much we are spending on insurance claims when that is like the main reason why we need to concentrate the money on A, B and C for safety. And even, for example, a lot of those claims could have been footpaths, we just don't know, rather than the road itself. And I feel, it is a big issue. So I think, if we could get it back to us, and we could make a recommendation around it then.
Councillor Jones? number of strands of evidence, thank you, and matters of record that need to be captured, and I was just wondering what are these strands of evidence and matters of record, and have you captured them, since recent times?
Just a paragraph, sorry.
It's 3.8.
Yeah.
Right, this is the initial findings, the draft findings from Zurich. Yeah. The strands were little areas that we need to check with the finance team. It's not so much from what we're doing with the HAMP, but to cross-reference those with finance and the insurance parts of it. And they will be pursued by the relevant officers.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley? Yeah?
Where are we? There. I think so we're on there. So it's all these strands of evidence that was getting me. How has the HAMP 2018 to 2023 fully considered future generations and well-being? E.g., integration, one of the 5 ways of working, the configuration of the network and how it changes over time need to be integrated into other changes, e.g. new health facilities will change travel patterns. How will that influence where the investment goes? I'll repeat that.
Right, no, I think I got the...
It's future generations and well-being stuff.
The
5 ways of working.
The Highway Asset Management Plan is fundamental to the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. Without good transport links, you can't have access to all these services that we require. It's a fundamental base block of the well-being and fund. So from that point of view, anything that we do with that will have obviously a huge effect on the well-being of our community. Obviously, when we take this to Cabinet to have it agreed, there will be an assessment done, and the information will be pulled out at that time to match the requirements of the 5 ways of working and the 7 outline core subjects. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Evans?
Right. Mine's on long-term planning, and the reason I'm bringing that up, how are we assessing future road needs, considering new housing developments and the new hospital?
That is part of a long-term, it would be part of the long-term Highway Asset Management Plan. As it's been stated, this is a 5-year iteration, so we change it every 5 years. We will look, started the last one in 2013. We're now changing and looking to change this one to match today's needs. When I started authoring the HAMP, a lot of the new housing estates were, yes, coming online. However, we didn't know about the hospital. The hospital was on hold. We didn't know long for. They will be included within the long-term planning, probably for the next iteration. However, what we will do is to look at sort of like a midlife update of the Highway Asset Management Plan in maybe 2.5 years' time. We will look to see whether it will do a desktop exercise, sense check it, see if it's fit for purpose, and where it's not, we will amend it to match what we've got in the borough.
Yeah. I think growth, things like the hospital and new housing estate are looked at not purely in connection with the HAMP or by the HAMP or controlled by the HAMP. They'll be controlled by other legislation, local development plans, the active travel legislation that all authorities are going through now and producing our integrated network maps, things like that. So there will be other strategies which will be looking at ensuring sustainable growth across the borough.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Ashley.
Who's on? I've got how are footpaths prioritised and curbstones maintained. I could also probably add on-street cycleways because they're included in the same way. I know cycleways in general are not included as far as I know.
I can give you the information. We are slightly diversifying from the capital allocation. The capital allocation tends to look at roads because they are the ones that get hammered the most. Yeah. Footways degrade very, very slowly. The last work that we did, large major work that we did under the LGBI was back in 2015 for footways, where we looked at all our the worst slabbed areas and we tarmacked them. Yeah. The footways are looked at, but not with the same priority as the carriageways because of their speed of degradation.
I would say, as a non-driving pedestrianised person wherever I go, the one thing that seems to be worse than anything, and I'm sure other members have said this, is actually and it must drive you mad, is actually the slab, the curbstones, because with the all over the borough, not just Cwmbran, but it's very prevalent in Cwmbran, the parking on the pavement and the delivery drivers with seems very, very common, large vehicles crashing up and that. It's something you're doing all the time.
Parking is another issue, isn't it, at the moment?
Not the parking, but the crashing up and down the curb.
Yeah, they would be looked at, individual curbs would be looked at as a safety risk rather than a condition risk. So they would be picked up by the inspectors on the safety inspections and highlighted and then dealt with as necessary.
Is there any chance that we're looking at grants or anything like that doing in Abergavenny, in Monmouthshire, where they've got rubber curbs? They seem quite effective, those, as a grant.
Not that I'm aware of. We have tried several modular types of curbing. Plastic ones have been used. Recycled plastic ones have been used.
Yeah. Possibly supply us with information, because we're sort of going off at a tangent.
Might save money.
I think for me, and I've got Councillor Slade, I know you wanted to come back in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just disappointing to know that perhaps footways are not a priority, because as I understand it with insurance claims, the higher value claims are generally personal injury claims, which tend to happen on footways, where carriageway claims are generally vehicle for sort of alloy wheels, but they're generally property claims and of lesser value. That was just a point of it.
Thank you, Aaron.
The information that I've got from the insurance manager is that the majority of claims come from traffic rather than footway.
I guess we'll find out when we get the analysis of the claims. Chair, thank you.
Can I just ask, how many claims are you getting off rather expensive cycles these days are going down foot? Because that's when you don't collect, isn't it? But that's it.
Yeah, okay, that is something outside the report. We can give you that information if you want to, but that would be for the insurance officer or insurance manager to report rather than the capital allocation.
I think one of the conversations that we were having yesterday, actually, my question really is about if you have a road that's been built and is classified to a certain classification and is declassified for whatever reason through an alternate route being put in place, etc. When a utility company comes along and digs up a road to put in a new pipe or whatever, the repair or the utility company, are they expected to reinstate it to the now declassified level, or are they expected to repair it to the level that it was built at previously to it being declassified?
As it stands, they have to repair it to the point that as it stands. But again, that is dealt with under the New Roads and Streetworks Act, and is not something that I've been asked about within this, so I'm not fully up to speed with it. I do know we have an inspector that goes around and has a look at all the staff undertakers' works in the highway. We have, when he was first employed, we because there is a compensation scheme to the local authority whereby they can charge the errant statutory undertaker a fee for inspection, and in the first year, 2 years, we gained a lot of money from poor quality reinstatements. Fortunately, the inspector is very diligent, and by making sure that the reinstatements were done to specification, we've now got to a point where those sums of money that come into the council are very, very small, to the point where they know that the stat undertakers won't put bad gangs into Torvine, they'll send them somewhere else, Newport, Swansea, wherever, and allow them to do their work down there. We get the good gangs who reinstate the roads as they should be reinstated, and where they're not, they are hammered.
That's the sort of thing, is what are they being reinstated to? Are they being reinstated to the declassified level of road, or to the previous build classification? And that's what we were trying to tease out.
There's the specification of a road. The specification of the road is the specification of the road. It's designed for a certain amount of traffic. If it's declassified, it then becomes designed for a certain amount of traffic, whether that is low use or whatever. So it will be designed, it will be reinstated to the designated classification.
So to the declassified level, not the previous, is what I'm, Councillor Slade.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be the streetworks manager. That's not strictly true, in my opinion. And I brought along the code of practice, which says surface layers, if any, shall be reinstated as far as practicable to match the existing construction. So if it was constructed, I'll give you an example, Newport Road was a trunk road many years ago, back in the days of Gwent. It was a trunk road, and it was constructed to carry trunk road traffic. Now it's it's a classified unnumbered road, which is. But what I'm saying is, when it comes to reinstatement, it should be reinstated back to the same construction as it is now. It should be. But I do notice from one of the appendices that it's been given a reinstatement category of 3, which is more in keeping with its current classification, if you like.
Okay.
Just saying. Thank you.
Okay, so I can feel a recommendation coming out there. And the last question is Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. How is the investment in the highway network weighed up against investing in alternative travel routes?
They tend to be different funding streams. We've got base budget allocation from the council for need-based, as has been referred to probably in this report, and then there's other grants made available to the council, as in LTPI, things like that. from the council in previous years that highway maintenance needed some bolstering when those grants dropped out, so the council weighed those up and invested further in prudential borrowing. I think at the moment there's opportunity for transport schemes via Welsh Government more readily than highway maintenance schemes. So active travel, for example, some road safety depending on the criteria, some pinch point type construction. So we tend to bid for the money we can from Welsh Government, and then the funding we get from the council tends to be for those areas that isn't perhaps covered so readily by Welsh Government grants. Obviously, again, a political decision where to direct funding that the council has. Appreciate they're very difficult decisions for the council and for members.
Councillor Powell? Yeah. Just for some clarification on the back of that, with the grant monies then for active living, etc., is that going to be mostly sort of footpaths, that you can use for your needs and sort of drop curbs, disability access then?
Typically, it will be. It'll be. It's about removing barriers to travelling by the private car. So it could be widening footways. It could be building new shared use footway cycleways, improving existing footway to a shared use cycleway. So
just so when you're working on the budgets for that, are you looking to get most of your footpath maintenance and things built into that, or are you still allocating from the main?
I think going back to footway maintenance, I wouldn't want members to think that we don't look after footways. I think, as Mark explained, because the lower rate of degradation, we don't need the perhaps a whole-scale intervention generally in it. We don't look for maintenance works through active travel funding. That's not available for maintenance works. It is available for improvement works. But for example, if we had a 1 metre footway and we widened it to 2 metres to make an active travel route, we may very well resurface the entire footway. That arguably is some maintenance, but that is capital works for us.
So actually, yeah.
Very quickly, I want these sort of semi-answer the question. The actual standard on sustrans should be 3 metres all the way through, but it would be acceptable to have 2 metres. Part of the current network doesn't meet that. You know that, don't you? Anyway, yeah. And the problem you've got is that and the maintenance. Is it possible we'll ever get up to that standard?
It's a whole new question.
No, it's not.
I think that the difficulty is, and it's a difficulty with all design standards. It's an ideal, and it's right to have that ideal. But if you work in areas where you're bound by the existing infrastructure, properties, buildings, etc., it's going to be very difficult to implement the ideal. So, I think there is recognition within the guidance that should you not be able to achieve the ideal, as long as there's appropriate engagement, investigation, consideration, then you go for less.
I will say for a small authority we've done very well. Thank you for that.
Councillor Jones. I'd just like to ask, do you think we've done enough to sort of drop curbs and put special curbs in and things for blind and partially sighted people and disabled people in general? Are we up to scratch with that? Have we got enough of the right sort of curbs and the right sort of paths and the the right sort of ways to travel so that would enable sort of disabled people to get around successfully in Torfaen?
The broad answer is probably no. We're a very traditional infrastructure, particularly in the northern end of the valleys, and even the southern end of the valleys, where footways might be wider and alignment's better. They still weren't particularly au fait with drop curbs, tactile paving, things like that, and things have changed in design standards since areas were built. We do certainly try hard to do it. The council make an allocation towards the implementation of drop curbs, and has done for a number of years, so we spend that every year. We seek to get improvements from developers when developers are building new housing estates, things like that. If it's on the existing highway, New Junction, for example. And some of the active travel road safety engineering schemes, they've incorporated a lot of drop crossings as well, which assist those with mobility impairments. it'll be a task, I think, for this authority for many, many years, as it would be for most authorities, I would envisage, particularly those with traditional infrastructure, values infrastructure like ourselves.
Thank you. Councillor Slade.
Thanks. I've just got one last question. Page 54, paragraph 5.4, and this kind of sets out how you prioritise the maintenance schemes. And it says, all sites demonstrating high levels of safety risk to users will be considered first. Could you just explain, and the high levels of condition risk will be second. Could you just explain what you mean by a high safety risk? Because it seems that UK PMS scanner surveys and SCRIM goes into the second category, which suggests to me that the improvement we're seeing in the performance indicator is almost a happy circumstance, really.
Well, safety risk, as I explained earlier, is based on the number of vehicles or number of vehicular movements over a road.
Yeah.
So the higher the amount of safety risk, the higher that they will be considered first. So if you've got lots of vehicles going over a road, then that will be the...
Can stop you there. If you read the paragraph, I'll read it for you. A site or asset with a high safety risk will have a combination of some or all of the following: high levels of use, high levels of vulnerable users, subject to high speeds or where speeds have been deemed by investigation to be a safety issue, sites where vehicles and pedestrians can be expected to be in conflict, high levels of reported near misses or accidents.
Right.
Nothing in there at all about condition. At all. No number of potholes,
No.
number of cracks, nothing. There's just no mention of any sort of condition information within that.
No, because that's
at
safety.
Yeah, I know, but that's where how you prioritise, you know, a £1 million budget you get is based on that. And it's almost a secondary consideration of the annual, where the annual scanner survey shows red, or where our SCRIM survey might show the roads are slippery. That's a secondary consideration, and I kind of just, I don't kind of understand that.
That's what the whole reason for the HAMP is. It's a safety-led, and the Code of Practice says that we have to be safety-led. We have tried to match the Code of Practice through the CSS Wales guidance to our new HAMP, and we've always gone down the road of safety first, condition second, and high levels of life cycle risk. I remember that. Now it's here. I remember. So that's what is being required under the Code of Practice, and we're reflecting that in our Highways Asset Management Plan.
Yeah, but how do you know that those sites... I would have assumed that you could have a site that satisfies all those requirements, yet is in absolutely perfect condition. In those circumstances, would you? But how do you know? There is no mention of what condition the road is in that first paragraph. That's what I'm saying. Is it from safety inspections? Safety inspections have highlighted a concern, a safety concern.
Right, well, fair enough. Like I said, from looking at it, a high level of safety risk to be considered first. If it has a problem with it, with the surfacing or whatever, then that will be looked at first. The condition of the road, based on the scanner and the SCRIMs, will be looked at second. Perhaps I've not made myself clear enough here. Like I said, it's safety risk first, condition second, high level of life cycle risk third, which matches the guidance, the code of practice.
But if I point your attention to paragraph 5.4, the first category you've got there, site or asset, I read it out. there is no mention whatsoever about concerns with the surface. No. Because if there are concerns with the surface, that would be a road condition issue, surely. There's no mention in that first paragraph there about any kind of problem with the road surface. It says high levels of use, high levels of vulnerable users, high speed. There's no mention whatsoever of any kind of condition.
Right.
I kind of appreciate the point where you're saying, Councillor. And I'm not sure if it's the concern that if we had all of those but a perfect condition, we'd resurface, which we clearly wouldn't. No. But it's how then we get from looking at the safety risk to the condition risk and incorporating those two together.
Okay.
Is that as I understand it?
But that's not what it says.
I appreciate the way you're reading it is different to the way you read it.
No, it's the way it says. It will be allocated. First consideration will be high levels of safety risk. Yeah. From what you said, there is no safety risk. I mean, just because there's a high proximity to school, or there's proximity to school, there is no risk if there's no condition problem.
I accept that, yeah.
Well,
so we wouldn't resurface.
No.
I think we need to look at that wording again to try and
thank you.
Try and clarify that then.
Okay, thank you, members. Thank you for all your questions. I'd like to thank the officers for attending and for giving us answers to our questions. There isn't any need for you to stay while we do the summing up. We'd just like to thank you for attending and thank you for your time. Members, so thank you for that. I'd like to draw your attention to, we've circulated some information from Tim Pepin. He's the Director of Regeneration and Sustainable Development from the WLGA. He made some really, really good comments and questions that we have in the main covered here today. So I would just like to point out that we've had all of that information from him. I'm very, very grateful. Comprehensive report, and I think it'd be lovely if we could always have that level of interaction from outside. Councillor Ashley?
Before we go now, can I just ask one quick question, one observation for your summing up bit, because I've got to go. The only bit I've got is I noticed that when I asked them about having a database system, they didn't have one, or didn't have a very sophisticated one. You know the line of questioning, could we make that a recommendation if we could, please? That I don't know what we call it, but they didn't seem. When Alan asked them about they need something a bit more sophisticated than they've got, and it should be all linked to your Wales data.
So, members, we've come to the point in our meeting where we need to formulate our recommendations. If I just remind you what our scrutiny activity is. The Safer Communities Overview Scrutiny Committee are invited to scrutinise the processes and principles of how we utilise the capital allocation for highway maintenance, and to determine whether those principles are fit for purpose in minimising the risk associated with keeping the network safe, assess whether the detail provided within the proposed HAMP 18 to 23 Highway Maintenance Manual, paragraph 5.4, to identify those sites that qualify for capital investment is sufficient, and to ascertain whether the method of and level of communication is appropriate based on the constraints of the nature and complexity of both safety investigated and condition risk work. So I know that I've been taking some notes throughout the meeting, and there's a list of recommendations that I'm sure you can add to as I'm reading them out. I think the first one was very much the descriptions used in relation to the CSS report, that we would like the descriptions to be in line with the CSS descriptions as opposed to the ones that, because I completely agree that their version described the road network much more. Are you all happy for that recommendation? Yeah. The second recommendation was that we would like to see this to go to audit for an analysis of.
Sorry, Jake, can I just come in on that? Can I just, obviously, if you want to make that recommendation, that's fine, but can I just be specific on what you would want audit to look at, please?
I just think they should audit the process. I mean, what we're talking about here is sums of money being allocated to, you know, areas of road. And it's important that those areas of road are selected in a kind of objective, repeatable kind of way, and not just sort of selected at random. So there needs to be a system which is quite robust and objective and transparent. And I think that's, and fair. And I think that's what I would like audit to look at. Okay.
I think there was one about the repairing of declassified roads that were once higher in priority, that we should be looking to repair them to the standard they were built at, not the declassified version if utility companies, there was one about photographing potholes and sending it out via the communications team. Better communications, there was the recommendation about better and earlier communication and consultation with ward councillors, because I think that was it was a really good point that we are supplied a list at the end, and yet we've had no real input or consultation with that could avoid some roads being resurfaced on a local level. We know there are more needy roads. The task and finish group, it's not really a recommendation, but it's for us to...
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously that wouldn't be a recommendation, that would be something for you as a committee to decide, and I just would want to point out that that is something that would need to be member-led by you. It would need to be a small group of this committee that would need to go away, do the research. You'd have to have a clear set of objectives as what you would want to look at, and to bring that back to the main committee. So I would just be conscious, is that something that a route you want to take at the moment, or would you want to wait and see the recommendations perhaps from audit? Or
it's probably a good idea, wait till audit.
Yeah, we could do, but I'd be quite happy to be involved. I think it's important perhaps to see what other authorities are doing, because I know other authorities have more sophisticated systems, shall we say, even just within South Wales. So I think it would be advantageous just to pop to say Monmouthshire or Newport or Caerphilly, so just see what they're.
You could do that as an aside rather than just consuming a whole task and finish group to do that, but we can certainly organise that outside of this committee for you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
The thing that Alan asked is about the financial situation on the percentage of money being spent on certain roads. We're waiting for that, Right, so
that was information that they were going to bring back to us, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It is in the recommendation, the other recommendation was the 2%, to raise the 2% figure that we've got to higher as per WAG, to allow us to concentrate on more local roads, was one of the other recommendation,
But can I just come back in on that then, because Councillor Sage, you mentioned that it was 8% for WAG, but I think we're around the 4% mark, so what sort of figure would you...
I would say just have a quick look at that. They did supply a table where we are comparable with other authorities. Just looking at, I don't know, a figure plucked out of the air would be about 7%, which was kind of halfway, I think. And I think that's something we could live with. You're talking about 7 kilometres in 100. I mean, that doesn't seem a bad target to me.
No.
Thank you.
And the last thing that I noted that Councillor Ashley was around the database, Did he give you more information on that?
Well, no. But I will just see what I took from what he gave me. Clearly they need some sort of linked up database. They say that it would be a huge cost implication and a time implication, but I don't know that, so I would like them to look into it, or somebody to look into it for them, and then tell us that, from an expert point of view, whether it would be that difficult. Because
I don't think it would.
Yeah, that's what...
Well, got on that. I mean, they were basically saying, you can relax now. what they were saying was, from what I got, it's there's 1,400 roads and they haven't got any like main fault cards for them. So if they had something like a fault card for each road, and then surely then they could identify problems on each road then far more easily and score it up to the importance of it being repaired then. So maybe that's the idea that they need to do, is actually identify them.
I don't know whether Stuart was trying to imply, by them having a more sophisticated data system, that we could get a better outcome of these particular roads. So what they were putting in, we were getting more efficient data coming out to see what would be repaired on a wider scale rather than a paper exercise. That's what I'm trying to get.
Hope the outcome of a better database would be that we get better value for money, but also improved roads. Jess, I think you wanted to...
Yeah, so I picked up, when we were talking about the reclassification of C roads, I was wondering if I don't know if we can do it as a committee, or we advise the member to write to the Minister for Wales and ask, why haven't we done that as well? That seems very sensible. I would just like them to put some pressure on them.
Was there anything else that I missed there? Or...
We just enjoyed...
I'm sure you covered everything there. I'll just quickly run through the action points, though, that you wanted some additional information on. So you also wanted figures on the safety defects, figures for the funding. You raised about the 70% on 30% of roads, so you wanted more information on that. And also the figures on 100 insurance claims that weren't defended.
Brilliant. I think we've summed up the entire meeting. So just really on to the next agenda item, which is the date and time of the next meeting. The next meeting is on the 16th of January, and we'll be looking at violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. Now we're going to be asked to be scrutinising that, and we have a document here. Basically what I'm looking for really is some suggestions on any invitees, or whether you'd like to go and visit anywhere. Or...
I would like the police to attend, because they tend to have to deal with a lot of these situations. So I think they would probably be the best people to approach over there.
I'm always up to date on domestic violence, so are there some specifics who deal with domestic violence, such as Women's Aid and people like we could get to engage?
I suggested that we should contact the people who did the seminar a few weeks back. The police officer who came was absolutely excellent. He was like the lead for South Wales on it, and they had another woman as well from a sort of umbrella organisation. So if that's if you're happy with that, we'll go for that. Yeah.
To mention that we have it so it's gender balance for men and women, the violence.
And non-gender, of course, because it's not always a gendered issue.
That's right.
So that really brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance, for your excellent questioning.
Did you finish it?
Absolutely, early. So thank you very much for all your input and questions. Good meeting yet again.
Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I'll close the meeting.